My guest today is Harrison Borough. This is the first of our student series in which Harrison and I will be discussing various essays in Objectivism, and today we're going to be discussing the Objectivist Ethics. Harrison, welcome. Harrison, could you just introduce yourself?
So, as Maxim pointed out, my name is Harrison. I've just finished my undergraduate of medical sciences, and I'm seeking to pursue an honours in the coming year. And Maxim first got me into Objectivism through sharing the Ayn Rand essays, and particularly Ayn Rand's speech about what is philosophy, who needs it, or I think it's called Philosophy, Who Needs It. Mm-hmm. And this series is a very good opportunity for both myself to ask questions, read the essays, and learn more about Objectivism, and for Maxim to communicate Objectivist theory in a way that makes sense to someone who is learning about it. A lot of philosophy discussion can be quite high level, and I think it's a good opportunity to bring it back to the real nitty-gritty and the basis of what Objectivism is.
Yep, good. And this is also an experiment for me because I want to test my understanding, and Harrison here has prepared some pretty tough questions. So we'll see how we go. But this is recommended viewing for anyone currently or who has already read the Objectivist Ethics. That's the lead essay in The Virtue of Selfishness. So we'll be discussing that today. All right, Harrison has some questions prepared. Let's get into it.
So first up, Rand sets out to ask and answer why man needs a code of ethics first before what code of ethics to adopt. Why is this such a fundamental question in ethics?
Mm-hmm. That's right. So most ethical theories dive right into, well, which ethical theory is right? If you go to university, you learn about utilitarianism, duty ethics, deontology, sometimes it's called. You learn about virtue ethics, maybe. And you learn about, say, pluralistic or monistic moral theories, but there's no one asking the deeper question, well, why be moral in the first place? Now, Rand's kind of revolutionary theory on this is that the very same facts that necessitate a code of ethics, which we will get into, also necessitate a particular type of code of ethics. So it's not subjective. You can't just blindly follow any ethical system and expect to achieve any good results. In fact, most ethical systems achieve very bad results. Where was I going with this? The idea is that the same facts which make a code of ethics necessary at all also necessitate an egoistic code of ethics. That is, a code of ethics based on the principle that the individual is the proper moral beneficiary of his or her own actions. But there are different types of egoism, and we will discuss the objectivist variant and the arguments that she makes for that. So why is it important that we establish that man needs a code of ethics first? Well, are you asking what is her argument for that? Or will we get into that later?
I think we'll get into a bit of the argument later, but the question about why it's such a fundamental question, I think, is because you have to have a reason or a tangible way to think about ethics and the source of that ethical code.
Yeah, and you need a reason to even bother with ethics. So why be ethical? And Rand gives an answer, because your life requires it. Basically, that's the basic answer, is you have to make certain choices. You are a free volitional being. If you weren't free, if you had no choices, there would be no need for ethics. You would just do whatever you had to do, and there would be no need to decide, because you couldn't decide. But the fact that we are free, that we don't have any automatic means of, we don't have any instincts, we don't have any pre-programmed behaviors that we can guarantee if we just follow these like all the other animals do, that we will survive. We don't have that. We have to gain knowledge, we have to think a certain way, we have to act according to certain principles, and those principles constitute the code of ethics. And she makes the argument that ultimately to be successful, all our actions should ultimately be guided by sustaining and furthering our own life, the individual's own life. But we'll get into that. We'll get into that later. I don't want to jump ahead.
And so, briefly to that, Objectivism establishes that the ultimate goal of a living organism is their life, or that which is required for their survival. So this could be like getting food, getting sleep, getting shelter, particularly for humans. And so this is why Objectivism argues that the standard of life is value, as that something that does not further a goal or a lesser goal to the ultimate goal. I feel to better word this, life is
the other way around. Life is the standard of value.
Life is the standard of value, simply because anything that is of value to an organism fulfills its ultimate goal of living or pursuing its own existence. And so the question that I have for this is, are values derived from or a consequences of the goals held by an organism? So do you value something because you want to live, or do you want to live because you value something?
It's both from different aspects. So let's take a step back and look at how she even looks at the issue of value. If you read the Objectivist Ethics, one of the cases that she makes is that, well, one thing she's trying to do is overcome the is-ought problem, which was posed by David Hume explicitly. The idea of the is-ought problem is, well, there's all these facts about the world, and there are all these descriptive things we can say. For example, this desk is white and so on. But then we also have normative claims. People should do something. You should be selfish, or you should be altruistic on other theories and so on. And the question he posed was, how do we progress from descriptive claims to normative claims? He said we cannot deduce normative claims from descriptive claims. That's true, you can't deduce them like that. Rand makes an argument that's inductive for egoism specifically. But what she points out is that the mere existence, the sheer existence of living organisms means that there are ends that are being pursued. So we are pursuing, organisms act to achieve certain goals. That's just an observation that we can make. That's a descriptive claim. The question is, well, why are they acting to achieve certain goals? And she points out, well, they're acting to achieve values that sustain their life, right? So those goals are all oriented around getting things from the external environment and also using that fuel effectively to sustain its life. And if the organism cannot perform both of those, it dies. So it survives by achieving its values. Now, in the case of plants, they do it, well, plants do it, both plants and animals do it automatically, but plants stay in one spot, right? And they basically sprout their leaves, they turn it towards the sun, they're seeking values. Animals do the same things, they just move around and they have different biology, a different means, and possibly a more sophisticated means of acquiring the fuel that they need for their survival and using that fuel in a manner that keeps the organism alive. So the standard of all their actions is their life. Now, of course, they're not making any choices in this regard. They evolve this way. They evolve to have certain instincts, and by instinct, we mean a pre-programmed set of behaviors that kick in when a certain stimulus is present. For example, if a tiger is hungry and it sees whatever tigers hunt, then it would leap at it and run it down and kill it and eat it, and then its body would use that fuel to stay alive. Back to your original question, because I sense I may have strayed a little.
Are values derived from or a consequence of the goals held by an organism?
Values derived from or a consequence.
So if your goal is to live, do you derive value based on that? Or if you have a prior value, does your goal stem from that value?
Oh, I see.
Like if you really value money, and then your goal becomes to get more money.
Oh, okay. So now we're speaking in the human context. So you're talking about when people actually make choices. I was going through the argument made in the Objectivist Ethics for the fact that life is the standard of value, and that applies to all living organisms. Now, man is different because human beings make choices. We have no automatic instincts. We don't get any kind of information built into our DNA about, well, just do this in this situation and you'll survive. In order to survive, we need to gain knowledge. And we have to choose to pursue that knowledge, to really integrate it, and then to guide our actions accordingly. So if a person really values money, then they can, of course, set goals to get it. We can talk about that, whether that's actually a rational value. I think it is in a context and it's not out of context.
Okay, thank you. And so then, because we, as the way Rand puts it, is reason is man's faculty for survival. So I believe you put it quite well when you said that you could take a cat or a dog and you could take a baby, have it have no interaction with any parent or any other organism, put it on a desert island, and it'll know how to hunt, it'll know how to get food, and it'll pursue those.
The baby won't.
Or when it's grown up. When it's grown up.
Are you talking about a human baby? Or
No, an animal baby. So like
Right,
baby
I see.
cat or dog,
Yes.
you grow them up without any social
A human
interaction.
baby couldn't do it.
And so in that sense, they have an automatic drive, they know what to do, so that's an instinct. Whereas if you took a human child, didn't teach it anything, grew it up into an adult, put it on a desert island, they would have no way of getting food. They wouldn't. They'd first have to start acquiring knowledge and then start evaluating how to get food.
Just to kind of make a small point there, that
Yeah.
like a little addendum. The people will come back and say, okay, but don't you realize that cats teach their kittens how to hunt and so on? And that's true. So in the case of more advanced animals, if they evolved in a manner that would require the parent to teach its offspring, quote, teach. It's not teaching like we are teaching right now. Quote, teach its offspring. But what's really happening is I suppose you could say they're training their offspring, right, in the way that you can train a dog. They have evolved to train offspring when they have that, but they don't have any choices about this. This is completely automatic. That's how that kind of organism evolved, was that when it was young, it got that kind of instruction so that it could learn to survive. But the difference is this, that kind of, quote, you couldn't even call it knowledge. It's not conceptual. It's just one cycle of behavior being repeated over and over and over through the generations with no improvement, no kind of thought and innovation. What is happening is that an organism is simply adapting to its environment. Now, the difference is that man doesn't adapt to his environment. Man adapts the environment to himself, herself. So, for example, this room is not the result of us adapting to the natural environment, because we can't adapt to the natural environment. We have to change our physical circumstances to suit our particular type of existence, to suit the requirements of our particular human lives.
So then how do we, as rational conscious beings, establish a set of values? I would presume it's iterative, but I'd like to hear what you think.
So by iterative, you mean we kind of set a small goal, we see how that goes, we set another one, and
yes, so
course
you're
correct as we go.
continually evaluating and updating your values, just as someone would presumably update their core set of beliefs the more they learn.
There's two questions here. How do we and how should we? How do we is a matter of it's up to every person. How to set rational goals. There's a whole method to this, and it's not a purely philosophical question. So philosophy simply says that in order to survive, you must have life as your standard of value, at least at some level implicitly, right? But in terms of how we do that, that's a very complex psychological question. Yeah.
So it would probably be more individual then.
What exactly is more?
As in, on the individual case, how does someone go about updating or gaining values that they will then pursue, versus how they should do that by a philosophy? The distinction between like an individual making a choice about a value that they pursue versus how they ought to pursue that value in the first place. Is that the distinction you're getting at?
Well, yes. I'm
Okay.
pointing out the fact that we can set goals as rationally or irrationally as we wish, but only the rational ones are the ones that are worth pursuing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so Rand defines virtues as the means of gaining or achieving values. She establishes the objectivist's cardinal value as reason, purpose, and self-esteem, which are obtained through their respective virtues, rationality, productive work, and pride. Using these cardinal values and their virtues, may you elaborate on how virtues are the means that underpin values?
Yes. So a virtue is not an end in itself on the objectivist account. Aristotle, for instance, thought that he didn't think virtue was necessarily an end in itself, but he thought that happiness was basically virtue plus external goods. If you have virtues and you have certain external goods like health and wealth and so on, and friendship, then you can be happy. And then he had this whole theory about the contemplative life being the most kind of eudaimonistic and so on. And then you have, he was a good guy. Then you have the really bad guys like Immanuel Kant, who said virtue is its own reward. And his idea of virtue was following duty for its own sake. And actually, you get more credit for following duty if you hate it than if you like it. Because then you really know, like if you hate it, you know you're acting out of a sense of duty rather than for some low self-interested reason.
Oh, so it was really like you must self-sacrifice.
Oh, not only do you have to self-sacrifice, you have to hate it to be considered really good. You have to feel like this is grinding against every, quote, instinct in you, and still do it because you just love duty so much. Anyway, but so that he said virtue is its own reward. Objectivism doesn't take that kind of approach at all. Objectivism says virtue is just the means to gaining values. It's an action guiding principle that is, its whole purpose is to sustain your life. Remember, the standard of, life is the standard of value. So, and what gets values? Virtuous action. So, for instance, what are the 7 virtues? Rationality is the master virtue. Yeah, ultimately everything is subsumed under rationality. But because it's so broad, it's not very helpful. So we have to include the other 6. It's what? Honesty, pride, productiveness, independence. I should really know this off by heart. Honesty, pride, productiveness, independence, justice, integrity. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Is that 6?
I think that's 6.
Yeah. Okay, so those, we can kind of go through them all, but she already does this in the Objectivist Ethics. She explains why each of those virtues is rationality in a particular context. So for example, the virtue of honesty, did I mention that one?
Yes.
Yes. The virtue of honesty means it's not primarily a social virtue. Like on the conventional account, honesty is about telling other people the truth. Now that's definitely part of honesty, but the foremost part of honesty is being honest with oneself. And what does that mean? It means never attempting to fake reality, not evading, accepting the facts as they are, really acknowledging them, because it comes out of a respect for the fact that the facts are the facts. It's not some kind of, again, it's not a duty, it's not something that, it doesn't harm you to be honest if you have a proper conception of honesty. Honesty does not mean, if the famous example that Immanuel Kant gave, and that has since been adapted to you're in Nazi Germany, you're hiding Jews under your floorboards, and then Hans Lander or some Nazi comes to your house and says like, are you hiding Jews? Now Immanuel Kant says, yep, you have a categorical imperative to tell the truth, right? So you have to be honest with this extremely evil person. So no, that's not honesty. That's not dishonesty. Dishonesty in the Objectivist account is the attempt to gain values by fraud, right? So it's actually really seeking the unearned in a social context, and in an individual context, it is faking reality to yourself, which can't be done. You can tell yourself something is true that isn't, but you can't actually make it true that way.
No matter how many times you believe that the sky is purple, it won't be purple. I mean, granted, you can have a sunset.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It won't come about from you telling yourself that there's a sunset when it's pitch black in the middle of the night.
Yeah,
so, that's right.
And briefly, I've heard about, say, men will fall to their vices or women will fall to their vices, and I believe Rand sets vices as the opposite of virtues. And my question is exactly that: are vices the opposite of virtues, and do they undermine or destroy values that you are pursuing?
Yes.
Okay.
That's actually universally agreed upon, that vices are the opposite of virtues by definition, but what's disagreed upon is like why virtue is important, what virtue consists of, and kind of where it sits in relation to values and happiness and so on. That's what philosophers disagree on. But yes, vices are just by definition kind of, it's like anti-virtues.
So like the vice of irrationality would be irrationality.
Exactly, the master vice.
Or productive work would be unproductive work.
Well, it's not productive work, it's framed as productiveness, which means productive work, but not in the strictly economic sense necessarily. So you can be very productive, just in a way that, for a while at least, doesn't make any money. For example, if you're, Ayn Rand spent, 12, 14 years writing Atlas Shrugged. Now that was extremely productive. And she was far more productive than the market gave her credit for by the number of books that she sold. So she distinguishes in a different essay, I think it's in Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, between, I could be wrong about this, but between socially objective value, which is the sort of market value of something, and the philosophically objective value, which is, say, the value that you could say philosophically objective value is kind of the value one would ascribe to something at their best, at their most rational. So that you could say the philosophically objective value of Atlas Shrugged is so much higher than its socially objective value. But it is the market functions on the ladder.
Okay, thank you. So, as humans, we are inclined to rationalize the decisions that we make, to believe that we are always doing what is right or what is necessary. In cases of murder, betraying another, we may rationalize the action to be like, it was the only way, or I had to do it. And so, leaning into that ethical grey of decision making. So how can we be sure that we are using reason to judge our actions, or if we are twisting our cognition to fit a moral view of ourselves?
I'll take the first part first. So we're inclined to rationalize our decisions. I don't think we are. I don't think we have any, quote, inclination like this. Inclination is something a person develops.
Would you prefer the word justification, as in to justify your actions as opposed to rationalize them?
Oh no, rationalization is a perfectly fine word.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, but what is rationalization? So rationalization means using reason, or pretending to use reason, really, to try to give reasons for something that a person already knows isn't proper or isn't rational. So, for instance, you can think of very easy cases like an alcoholic who tries to rationalize drinking, right? When there's clear evidence that in their case they shouldn't be drinking. That would be rationalization. Now, actually, I should point out an interesting thing. No, actually, we'll just move on. Ethical grey. How do we navigate the ethical grey? I read your question.
Yeah.
How do we navigate the ethical grey? By acknowledging the fact that there is no actual such thing as ethical grey. There is only black and white. There's an essay on this called The Cult of Moral Greyness by Ayn Rand. And everything that seems grey and that is grey in aggregate is comprised of pieces of black and white, of complete black and complete white, complete good and evil. So most people are morally, quote, grey, but what that means is they have parts of them are completely good and parts of them are completely bad. And it can be extremely difficult to untangle that, particularly in the psychology of one person. And a person, those two things are by nature contradictory. So they might be acting on one premise one moment and the opposite premise another. And you have to, in those cases, in the case of an individual, judge what is fundamental to them. Are they fundamentally good, fundamentally evil, or is it someone in the middle where it's like you can deal with them to a certain extent, but not beyond that extent? For instance, if I'm just buying something from a person who owns the shop, unless I have evidence that they are really evil and I am basically sponsoring that evil, I'm going to trade with them, even if I think they're immoral in various ways. I don't really care because I'm just exchanging a material good. But I would never be friends with this person, let alone marry them or something. So the closer you are with someone, the more you have to make sure that they are fundamentally a good person, a moral person. Yeah.
Is that...
It's the same goes for institutions too.
Yeah, is that along the lines of sort of just evaluating the utility or the little tiny pieces of good or bad and then summating that.
I wouldn't say utility, that's the wrong term here.
I think I use the word utility just because it makes me think of utilitarianism.
That's why I'm saying it's the wrong word.
Yeah.
Yes. What's your question again?
It was the first part. So the first part we've covered, which is how can we be sure if we're using reason to judge our actions? And you disagreed that that sometimes we don't use reason to judge our actions.
Oh no, so the fact that we have reason also creates the ability for us to rationalize irrational actions. This does not mean to make them rational, it means to pretend that they are rational, right? That's what rationalization is, and those are the facts that make it possible to rationalize. Yes, it's not good to rationalize, but it's possible to. And it's possible only to a rational agent. Only it actually comes from at least some degree of respect for rationality. If a person didn't care about rationality at all, they wouldn't bother rationalizing. They would just say, "Oh yeah, I feel like it. Who cares about reason? I don't need a reason." That would be that wouldn't be rationalization.
Yeah.
Rationalizing is you know that something is immoral or something is wrong and so on, and you try to pretend that it's okay by coming up with all sorts of non-essential justifications. So you kind of don't think in fundamentals, you drop the context, you can do this in all sorts of ways. All of them include at least one error in like some kind of epistemic or moral error.
So then, let's say two people who both had to defend themselves against an attacker, and one of them, all of the little value pieces, I think as you said, you've got the moral good and the moral bad, a whole...
I mean, what I'm referring to is the premises within one person.
Okay.
So people's actions are motivated by the implicit premises that they hold, that what they basically believe at some deep level to be good or bad. And for example, a person may be out of focus routinely because they resent mental effort, and their premise may be, the mistaken premise may be that mental effort is it's purposeless, or worse, that it's just too much work, and they don't like that work, and they would rather just let somebody else think for them and tell them what to do. Indeed, it's impossible. No one can think for you, but people can tell you what to do.
Because I'm wondering how...
Anyway, so you said two people are attacked.
Yeah, so if they're given a very similar context where they both had to defend themselves, and one person thinks it was, they reached the conclusion that it was what they had to do, that they did the right thing, and then the other person is appalled at what they had to do to defend themselves. Mm-hmm. Let's say it involves injuring your attacker, and they're appalled that they did that, versus the other person who maybe takes pride in the fact that they defended themselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, the second person is right.
And why? So I think I'm asking why are these two people reaching different conclusions?
Because of the premises that they hold.
Okay, and so then that affects their value judgments as to...
Yeah, are we talking about their emotional reactions in the moment, or are we talking about their...
the after the fact.
Like sort of the way that they regard the situation in the long run afterwards. Okay, so because the emotional reaction we can talk is a totally separate issue. You can have an aversive emotional reaction to doing something that you rationally sanction as necessary and good. I recently found a very small bird that was clearly about to die, like it was beyond saving, and it was suffering terribly, and I ended up the only way to kill it was with a brick. It just happened to be the case, so I killed it like that. And that was I didn't feel good doing it. I felt really bad, but I know that was the kindest thing I could have done in that context. Now, there's no obligation on anyone to do that sort of thing, but that was so the emotion I experienced was like horror and like a very unpleasantness, a deep unpleasantness. But I knew that this was like the rational course to take if I have any respect for like life and the general principle that like I want living things to live, and if they can't, to at least not be suffering for hours before they die anyway. When no help is possible and no improvement is possible. So those two people would regard that situation differently based on their premises. The example you gave is we're talking about two innocent people being attacked by just some random perpetrator, right? Well, clearly you have a right to self-defense. So the moral thing to do is to defend yourself and to feel good about it. But that doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to enjoy it emotionally, and that would probably reflect a healthy thing, because it would reflect the fact that you're so used to regarding people as values and as someone good, and so here's a huge exception to that. And so you've automatized a certain way of regarding other people, and now you have to really kind of go against what comes naturally to you, because you've automatized that to lash out in self-defense. But that's proper. And there's no reason to feel guilt for that. A lot of people feel unearned guilt for things that they should either be proud of or just quite neutral about.
And that's in reference to the long run. Well, as in less about...
That's in reference to the way a person looks at the situation over the long run.
Yeah. And integrating that context.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we've touched on this a little bit, but as humans, our basic means for survival is reason. Mm-hmm. And so man or humankind cannot automatically acquire the knowledge that they need to survive, nor automatically derive a course of action. And so they have no choice about the kinds of knowledge they acquire. So humans have to make a choice about the knowledge that we acquire and what actions to take based on that knowledge. So in this way, Rand asserts that human consciousness is volitional or voluntary. And is being conscious volitional because we lack instincts?
Consciousness in the broadest sense refers to any awareness of existence. So all organisms in that really broad sense are conscious.
So maybe in the sense of choosing
focus.
To be in focus versus out of focus.
Oh, that's different. Okay. So focus is a choice. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
an irreducible primary choice to get into focus. But once that's like the choice to basically just be paying attention. In effect, right? It's like you're focusing on something, or you're kind of you're ready to attend to whatever requires.
You're ready to
attention.
gain that knowledge or to think.
Yeah, that's right. So the choice to focus is irreducible. That's a point made in OPA, Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand by Leonard Peikoff. Could you ask a question again?
Is being conscious volitional because we lack instincts? So,
it's not necessarily, I don't know if it's because, it's that we lack instincts, and because we lack instincts, yet we need to survive, we have to choose to think, right? We have this ability, and it doesn't function automatically. This automatic thinking is a contradiction in terms. Thinking is motivated, it has to be directed, it has to be self-directed. Now, you can be kind of in a dazed, unfocused state where you're still, quote, thinking about things, and that kind of makes sense. But there it's really your subconscious giving you kind of whatever, just playing whatever tape is kind of the result of all the subconscious integrations and automatized thinking methods that you've gradually programmed over your life. And there the thinking will be as rational as your kind of mental habits are. Okay. But it's not directed, so you are out of focus in that state.
Okay. So would it be correlative or causative, do you think? That because we have no instincts, we choose to think or choose to be conscious?
Well, you don't choose to be conscious. Consciousness is a metaphysical fact of every organism in its own particular mode of consciousness.
We choose to be in focus.
Yeah,
because we have no instincts.
I don't know if I'd put it as like because. We're the kind of creature that doesn't have, but I should clarify, by instinct, I mean like an advanced, pre-programmed set of behaviors. Yeah. So for example, turtles hatch and they instinctively know which way to walk to the ocean, right? Or which way to crawl or whatever they do, to the ocean. The birds instinctively build nests. They don't think, they're not engineers. Beavers instinctively, they're almost like engineers. I think
they see a river and think, absolutely not.
Yeah. They see. Yeah, but they instinctively build these dams. It's not like they're studying water flow patterns and so on. It's that they hear running water, that triggers a stimulus to pick up a log and put it where the running water is. That's how it works. That's an instinct. Now, human beings may have like reactions, in the sense that if I put my hand on a hot stove, I'll move it off before I'm aware of what I'm doing. But that's just kind of like an automatic nervous system reaction. That is not sufficient to keep me alive. It's sufficient to maybe prevent me from burning myself, but it's not sufficient to tell me what to do in order to acquire values which I require to support my life.
You'd consider it a reflex, not an instinct.
I don't know, actually. Ayn Rand did say, like, man has no instincts. I think she was referring to the advanced cases.
The advanced cases,
yeah.
Because...
So that is instincts that are sufficient to actually lead to your survival, not just, like...
Not just avoiding danger.
Yeah.
Avoiding danger in the sense of, like, you have a hot stimulus, you go to touch it, you're burning yourself, then you...
Well, that's not even... Yeah, and that is automatic. Whereas, like, the knowledge that I shouldn't go to the Sahara Desert without food and water, without water, would be... That's conceptual knowledge, right? Because it's not like I'm feeling the heat now. It's I anticipate that I'm gonna like fry to death if I do that. Yeah.
And so that choice to be in focus, or in the sense that being in focus is volitional, which then I think Rand says by association that's choosing to be conscious because you have to think.
Well, again, you don't choose to be conscious. Consciousness is like, that's like, you don't choose to have 2 arms and 2 legs. It's exactly the same.
There's one part of
consciousness
the essay,
is awareness of existence.
Yeah, there's one part of the essay where she's talking about being in focus and then attributes it to, well, if you're not thinking, you're not reasoning, if you're not choosing to be in focus and you're not choosing to use reason, you're not choosing to use your faculty of survival, therefore
you're choosing not to live. Yeah. Or rather, it's more that you're not choosing to live. It's not like you're choosing to die.
Yeah.
It's that you're doing that by default, but it's not an active choice. It's This is like the villains in Atlas Shrugged. These are people who don't want to live.
Okay.
What that means is, it doesn't mean that they want to die. It means that they're not willing to do what survival requires, and they're just gonna keep evading this.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so.
And it gets to a point, of course, where they can't evade it anymore. Yeah.
And so that choice into be in focus or not, is that what constitutes our free will? So in the sense that a plant doesn't have free will because it automatically will pursue sunlight, water, and produce energy, or the same way that a dog will say either choose to sit or stay depending on if it gets food or not. And so there's always that reward sense, and it's always about the automatic choice of what serves you best in the moment. But we don't have that instinctual faculty.
It's not a choice by that definition.
Yeah.
It's probably determined.
And so because...
For the dog.
Yeah, because being in focus is volitional, is that why we would have free will, or is that what constitutes free will?
Well, you see, that already relies on us having free will. If we say volition. Volition and free will mean interchangeable.
Okay.
So free will is... Objectivism has a very unique perspective on what free will is. And to understand the way Objectivism looks at free will, you have to understand the way it looks at the unconscious versus the conscious mind. And this is what psychoepistemology studies. It's the study of, it's a slightly related issue, but tangential. I'll just go into what free will is. So free will is just the ability to choose between alternatives.
Okay.
Yeah, so it means you could have done otherwise. If you could have done otherwise, the choice was free, metaphysically, right? We're not talking about political freedom or anything like that.
Yeah.
We're just talking about metaphysical freedom, that is, you can choose what you do. But you can only choose what you do within the limited options that present themselves to you. And a lot of the time, like this is the classic example, if I say...
But you wouldn't be able to fly immediately right now. Like...
No, I don't even...
Because it's
that's a metaphysical impossibility, of course, but that's different. No, what I mean is that you can't think of that which you not only don't know, but doesn't occur to you. Like, if I say, name all the cities you can, right? You're going to start listing them, whatever, but you're going to miss plenty of cities that when I remind you of them, you're like, of course I missed that one, Okay. So free will, however, is the ability to choose to listen to the task, to engage in the task, to... the best example I heard of the connection between the conscious mind, which is basically directed and self-directed, so that's where the free will is the ability to make those conscious choices, and the subconscious mind, which is like the supercomputer of the... So the subconscious mind is the supercomputer. It's like your Google And the conscious mind is you typing into Google. So
Yeah.
for example, if I say name 10 cities, your conscious mind chooses to listen, to be aware, to accept the task or not. But if you choose to accept, then you type into Google your subconscious, that is, 10 cities. And then it gives you, Paris, London, whatever. And you can choose, it gives you the results. You don't choose which results come up. You don't choose the next city you're going to think of.
No.
But what you do choose is whether you say it out loud, whether you say, no, not that one, I'm going to think of some other one. Or whether you realize that you thought of a country and course correct or something like that.
It's like when someone's asked, like, name a country and they say Africa.
I had that exact example in mind. Yeah.
And so, following to be in focus or not being volitional, or choosing to use, or choosing to use your consciousness being volitional, then by needing to think and to make choices, we must bear the responsibility of those outcomes, good or bad. And so how does our responsibility compare to that of a conscious, irrational being?
You mean an irrational person?
Irrational person, or maybe a dog who isn't necessarily following reason.
Right. So the dog would not be irrational, it would be just a non-rational being.
Okay.
Irrational means you can be rational and you're not being rational. Like you're by evasion or default or choice, you are not being rational. So that's the difference between irrational and non-rational. Non-rational beings can't be responsible because responsibility, moral responsibility, means why are you responsible for something? Well, can you be held responsible for that which you did not choose? No.
Okay.
Morally responsible, that is. I can't be morally responsible for the fact that I was born male or that I have a certain height or so on, right? But I am morally responsible for every choice I make.
Okay.
And so something that can't make choices can't be responsible. Responsibility depends on choice.
Yeah. And so, irrespective of the action, so long as you're choosing to make it, you are responsible for it. And you will bear the moral consequence, whatever that may be.
Well, you bear the consequence of whatever the situation may be. So, even if you're not responsible for it, for instance, a person born in Iran will be born there and they'll live under that horrible regime, even though they're not morally responsible for it, unless, of course, they then advocate for it. But if they just, like if Ayn Rand wasn't responsible for the horrors of the regime she was, that she ended up in when Soviet Russia was established when she was a teenager. So, no.
Okay. This is taking a bit of a detour, but my next question is, why should desires never be taken as an ethical primary?
Ooh, that's a really good question. So, desire is just is basically an emotional attraction to something, an emotional sense that you want something, but it is not the same thing as wanting it.
Yeah.
Right, in the full rational sense of the word. Desire is it doesn't have the context. Desire is just, you're fat, you're on a diet, and you see the cake, and you desire it, right? And that's your desire, but do you actually, you can say I want it, but whether it's rational or not depends on many things. So why can't desires be regarded as an ethical primary? Because they're basically emotions. I don't know whether we should consider desire an emotion, but let's take emotions as the broader one, right? Why can't we just listen to our emotions? Why can't we just go by emotion? Well, to know that, we have to ask, well, what is an emotion? And I don't remember if she discusses it in that essay. Does she? Because you read it more recently.
Not that I can quite remember, but I think
she definitely discusses it in the Romantic Manifesto.
I think reasoning that she gives is that if everyone's desire was an ethical primary, then one person's desire to build a house would be ethically the same as the desire of another person to kill someone.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So I think she does that. She talks about that.
So there'll be a lot of conflict.
She talks about that in reference to utilitarianism, right? So she says, well, if we're just, quote, weighing preferences, then the, quote, preference of one man to produce a fortune and another one to steal that fortune should be regarded with equal moral, quote, weight, But let's go back to the emotions issue. An emotion is a automatic reaction to a stimulus it's a psychophysiological automatic reaction to a stimulus based on one's implicit value judgments. That's close to her actual verbatim definition. So there's two things.
On the topic of emotions, I have a bit of a prelude. Would you like me to read that? Yeah. So the Objectivist Ethics says that emotions are the automatic result of a man's value judgments by the subconscious and are estimates of which furthers or threatens a value, like a profit-loss calculator. This calculator is to be programmed by the mind through conscious and subconscious thought or social osmosis, the output of which, emotion, is based on a prior accepted premise or code.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's far better than the way I put it. But
that's why I wanted to include it.
Good. So maybe we should kind of elaborate on that. That's a little complicated to understand when first hearing it. So an emotion is not by its nature quite like rational or irrational. It's based on an implicit evaluation that is a very, like a lightning fast evaluation of a certain stimulus. The stimulus can be external, like an easy example is you see an aggressive looking person, like actually that's already an evaluation, but like you see a big, strong person with a machine gun pointing it at you. Well, fear is the emotion you will probably feel. Why do you feel fear? Because fear is the emotion one feels when their values are threatened, specifically when there's like a risk of losing a value that isn't yet lost. So it's the desire to protect one's values from threat. In this case, the value being threatened is one's life, which is the ultimate value. So to the extent that you value your life implicitly, no matter what you say, like as your kind of philosophical treatise, even the biggest nihilist would probably feel fear because they have to value their life to some extent. Every time they eat, they are acting in support of their life, no matter what their philosophical convictions are. That is their explicitly stated philosophical conviction. So they would feel fear because of the implicit fear of losing their life. A person who had absolutely no fear wouldn't care about their life. But then let's look at cases where a person feels fear for a different reason. Suppose
they're at threat of losing their job, and they feel fear because of that.
Well, yeah, and that can be rational or irrational. That's an understandable case of feeling fear because then it depends why you feel fear. Do you feel fear because you need this job to earn money to support your life, or because you like the job and it's really important to you, and you genuinely screwed up in some way and you're afraid of having the opportunities taken away because you screwed up? That's fine. But if you're afraid because your primary orientation is towards social approval and, oh God, what will the family think? Even if even if they're not affected in any way by you losing the job, like what will everybody else think? If that's your primary orientation, that's second-handed, and then the fear comes from the stimulus, the threat of losing the job, and the implicit evaluation of that as bad based on a certain subconsciously held premise. It may be consciously held, but it's unlikely to be. Because if a person admitted this to themselves, they would be embarrassed by it. But the real fear is they care what other people think.
They'd be exercising honesty.
Well, yeah, I mean, you should be honest about yourself if you have second-handed motivations, because then you can get rid of them. But in any case, then they would feel fear for the wrong reason.
On that point of emotions being the automatic responses to premises that we've accepted, how can we be sure that our emotional responses are based on rational premises?
By correcting the premises, by focusing on the premises first, and by practicing acting on them over a very long period of time. Emotions are also kind of connected with the whole issue of sense of life. That is kind of the background feeling you have about life. And this kind of goes into art. But I don't want to go into that because I'm not super confident on the relationship between those two things.
Let's start with how do you go about identifying the premise that an emotion is computing alongside or from?
That's a good question.
So introspectively thinking about why am I feeling this emotion?
Yes. Exactly. Well, that is how you do it.
You just gotta.
Yeah, so it can be hard, and for instance, I can normally figure out why I feel a certain emotion. I can pretty much always figure it out now because I've practiced it for a long time. But not in the moment necessarily. If it's a very strong emotion, you can't be expected to figure out why in the moment, because you have to let it pass, and then you have to assess the situation rationally and objectively and see, well, what premise was I acting on? What was the premise I accepted in order to form that implicit evaluation of this situation? And then you can assess, well, is that premise true? And even if it is true, was whatever produced that emotion, did I interpret that properly in relation to the premise I hold? So did I interpret the stimulus properly? For instance,
I think the way that I would think about it is you first identify what the trigger was, so what actually made you feel that emotion in the first place, because then, at least to me, you have something tangible that you can work from, and then start asking the question of, okay, why did that event or something or other trigger that emotion, and then you start going down that rabbit hole.
Right, yeah, so to take the easy example is like you see the person with a machine gun coming at you, you feel fear because the stimulus indicates that like this is a threat to your life, you value your life and you want to protect that value, so you feel fear. Okay, easy case. What about cases that are not so obvious? Like when somebody says some innocuous remark, seemingly innocuous remark, and actually a lot of people would not understand Ayn Rand in this regard because she was so philosophically integrated. She could see connections between things that people never saw. And when somebody would say something like, in a kind of completely casual way, they would say, oh, who cares, what's the difference? And she would realize like you are threatening every one of my values in that statement because so she would get really angry because, and you know, people would be confused by this because they'd go, what do you mean? I was just like trying to, you know, gloss over our disagreement. And she'd be like, but this is a disagreement on life or death issues. Yeah, and then oftentimes they would kind of correct themselves, and once she realized that they didn't mean exactly what they said, she would kind of calm down. But that's an extreme case of a person whose implicit and explicit premises are exactly the same. So that's actually something you should aim for, I think. So if you're surprised by your emotions, it's because you hold implicit premises that you're not aware of.
Okay.
Right. Or maybe you could be misinterpreting the stimulus to some extent too.
Or you may be operating on a premise that you wouldn't agree with, but you haven't identified that you're actually operating on it at that time.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And so then there's introspection to be done to become more self-aware about the origin or the premises on the basis of your emotions.
Yeah, introspection is hugely underestimated. Hugely undervalued skill. So something I'm working on. It's very it's not taken seriously in our culture. Introspection. It's not even taken seriously in philosophy as a means of like introspecting to realize you have free will. Is not given the same kind of legitimacy as extrospecting in science, where you look out at the world and you record data. Whereas, so that's considered valid, but looking at it as in just realizing the fact that, well, I can choose A or B. That's not considered a valid method. So, yeah.
Okay, cool. So next is Rand asserts that, quote, it is only on the basis of rational selfishness, on the basis of justice, that man can be fit to live together in a free, peaceful, prosperous, benevolent, rational society, end quote. Can you explain what Rand means when she says on the basis of justice?
Yep. So justice is a virtue, and the distinguishing characteristic of justice in the Objectivist 7 virtues is that virtue only applies to other people, or rather your dealings with other people. All other virtues are mostly directed inward, towards yourself and your behavior. Well, justice directs your behavior, but in the evaluation of others. So justice means evaluating other people objectively and acting accordingly, treating them accordingly. Yeah, objectivity in relation to other people would be the objectivist view of justice. And that's the ruling principle of moral relationships between people. You have to evaluate. She makes the case that you have to evaluate other people as objectively as you evaluate inanimate objects. It's just much harder with people because you can't see their premises. You have to ask questions, and then they kind of contradict themselves, or they can deceive you, or something like that. So it takes a long time to understand the identity of a human being.
Yeah, particularly questions that relate to motivations, values, goals.
Yeah, and those are the most important ones.
And so how does individualism create a prosperous collective or a prosperous society? And so she talks about...
the justification for individualism is not that it creates a, quote, prosperous collective.
No. But that is a result when you have individuals acting rationally in a society, then that society, which I've cheekishly called a collective, becomes more prosperous because you have
of course. If
you have trade and you have innovation.
If everyone in a group is better off, the group, I guess, as a whole is better off too. Yeah. But that's a very problematic way of looking at it metaphysically, because the individual is the unit of reality. An individual is a unit of reality. We are actually one entity. Yeah. There's no entity that is like parts of you, and there's no entity that is us. There's like you and me. So the individual is the unit.
Okay, so the individual, just to quickly get it in my brain, so the individual is a unit, and then you could consider a society as a summation of those units, or a collection of those units.
Well, there's no good definition of society, right? I mean, where does the society end? Yeah. Do you include all people on Earth, or the ones off it too?
What border do you start?
Or which border? Okay. The word society is a valid word probably, but it is used so badly to justify violating the rights of individuals that. So we can talk about anti-concepts maybe another week, which is a word like extremism, which integrates by non-essentials and is designed to obliterate a legitimate concept. Another good example that example is from Ayn Rand, Extremism. She wrote an article on that called Extremism or the Art of Smearing. And there's also a good one I learned from Harry Binswanger, Stakeholder. Do you see why?
No,
it's my favorite resume, little dot, liaising with stakeholders.
Oh, okay.
But stakeholder means basically anyone. So usually it's used in corporate settings. Yeah. And by stakeholders, they include everyone. They include the company owners, the managers, the employees, the suppliers, the customers, the government, the whatever.
People that value is being provided to.
Well, not even that, just everybody. The suppliers, the customers, the people in charge of the company, people the company has any dealings with, people who regulate the company are now also considered stakeholders. Like anyone who has any effect on the company, or that the company has any effect on, which is everyone, because reality is interconnected, is a stakeholder. So what this does is you put people who actually own the property and people who don't into one category, and give the latter rights over the former, quote, rights over the former, which means break the rights of the former, of the owners. Yeah, this is a credit to Harry Binswanger for that particular example.
So how does an action for the benefit of others differ between the objectivist's ethics and the variants of altruism being, say, mystic, the social, and the subjective?
Sorry, just say it again slowly.
How does an action for the benefit of others differ between the objectivist's ethics and the variants of altruism, being the mystic, the social, and the subjective?
Sorry, that's very confusing. Do you mind if I read it again? How does an action for the benefit of others? By the objectivist ethics, it's capitalized. Do you mean the essay? Or the objectivist ethics, like the ethics of objectivism?
I'll say the ethics of objectivism.
Okay. Yeah. It's really
it's probably a poor question, but
it's a good. I feel like there's like 3 questions in there.
I think so, because my line of thought is that.
And also, where does she say mystic, social, subjective?
In the last couple of pages, she goes over how you have the mystic, which is it is the will of God,
Yeah.
And then you have the social, which is just replacing God with the society.
Yeah.
And then you have the social, which
The
is
subjective.
The subjective,
which is my emotions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is it is good because I think it is good, not because it has any value.
Okay.
Or not objective value. And in an objectivist philosophy, you can still act for the benefit of others because you're acting within, say, your interest. If you provide value to another person and you derive a meaning from that, then you're acting within your own set of values. I think you really highlighted it to me when you said, oh, well, the currency changes. The currency changes from, say, a physical value to an emotional or a spiritual value. And
yeah, so the
I don't
idea
know
is
if
that
I've just
human relationships are based on the principle of trade.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
you can just be trading in different currencies. And oftentimes the trade that is not economic is actually it can be extremely beneficial. So like friends are effectively trading virtue, right? In a non-exclusive way. Then in the case of exclusive relationships, you're trading, but it's very different. Now there's a sexual element involved, probably. And there is an exclusivity, and there's, in most cases, a sex difference. So this all introduces a totally different set of, like, I guess you could call it currencies into the equation. It's just that you can't compute that as easily as you can compute market transactions, where it's like $10 for whatever.
Yeah. So then the difference then between acting for the benefit of another person.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No,
what's
there's
wrong
nothing
is
wrong with
acting against your own interests.
Yeah, which is the distinction between acting for the benefit of another person in, say, an objectivist's ethics versus an altruist ethics is that in altruism you are required to act for the benefit of others, irrespective.
No matter what,
No matter
what's
what,
good for you.
No matter what is good for you. Whereas
right.
in the objectivist ethics, you can act for the benefit of others, and generally you will do so because that gives you a sense of purpose or a sense of meaning. And so in that way, because the currency changes, it enables people to act for the benefit of others as a consequence of serving their own interest.
It can in a context. Yes.
Yeah.
You never harm another person by pursuing your interests if you do it rationally.
Yeah.
Now, let's be clear what we mean by harm. Suppose you run a business and I start competing with you. I have not harmed you. You may not like the fact that I'm competing with you, but ultimately the customers will go to the business that's better. Yeah. I'm not violating your rights. Now, even in cases where rights are being respected, you can probably... Actually, well, Ayn Rand said that, I guess she would preface this by saying where rights are respected. A person cannot help or harm another person in any important sense. I forget where she said that. Maybe it was even in one of her novels.
Oh, and it's like the only justification for physical force is in retaliation?
That's a totally different issue.
Okay, different issue.
No, totally different issue. No, this was more of a spiritual issue.
Okay.
The idea is that you basically control your own character and actions, and that all one can do is like help, kind of like point you in the right direction or point you in the wrong direction. But if they respect your rights, they can't force you either way. You have to. You choose what you do.
Yeah.
That's what she meant by another person can't help or harm another person in any important sense.
So in the case of the two business owners, the competitor business does not force the businessman one to lower their prices or offer a better product. They still have to choose that. Or they could increase their costs and change their products however they want. But ultimately their success as a business is relying on the consumer and the consumer's choice between those two.
They have to sell a product that other people value for a price that they'll be willing to trade at.
Yeah. The last question that I have comes a little bit at the end of the Objectivist Ethics essay, and also from the prelude of the book, the introduction. And this question is, why must man reject the altruist morality?
Because it's a morality of death. So it's an anti-life morality. Altruism says sacrifice, which means give up your values. Values are what you survive through. That's Your life is your ultimate value. All other values, if they're rational, real values, they serve that life. They advance that life. They support that life. They allow it to continue. Altruism says sacrifice all your values to others or to God.
Whoever those others may be.
Whoever or whatever that else may be. So yeah, altruism is self-sacrifice, which means death. Ultimately, if you take it really to the extreme, to the consistent end. So you can't be a consistent altruist. You could, but you would.
You still have to eat.
You would die very quickly. The joke, I think, that she made is that you would just go to a desert island, to a cannibal island, and offer yourself as a meal. That would be the end state of altruism. So that's. But she's absolutely devastating about altruism because she points out that there's no reason to be altruistic. That no, quote, earthly reason has ever been given. No one can answer why you should be an altruist. There is no answer to that.
It's like a gazelle wouldn't let themselves be prey for a predator, although you could argue that they might, in order to, like, for the
protect
for
the
like
offspring.
survival of the offspring, and that's a evolution question.
That's an
a
evolution
behavioral
question. It's not an ethical question.
No.
If I were advising the gazelle,
You would say right.
yeah, that's right.
There was, I think it was, I don't know if it was a Polish interview, but they were outside this forest and they had a deer come up to them. And so they they pointed the camera and gave the microphone to the deer and were like, and they said, would you like to say anything? And the deer just stared blankly at them going, what do I do? So I have that image in my brain.
All good.
But to close out on the altruist point, in the introduction of The Virtue of Selfishness, on pages 9 and 10, I found a section which I really think highlights why a rejection of altruism is a good thing. And quote, altruism permits no view of men except as sacrificial animals and profiteers on sacrifice, as victims and parasites, that it permits no concept of a benevolent coexistence among men, that it permits no concept of justice. If you wonder about the reasons behind the ugly mixture of cynicism and guilt in which most men spend their lives, these are the reasons. Cynicism, because they neither practice nor accept the altruist morality. Guilt, because they dare not reject it.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that.
It's a great quote. It is a great quote. Galt's speech has more on altruism. So
Is that
that's the speech that John Galt gives toward the end of Atlas Shrugged.
okay?
Yeah, that is actually the first systematic presentation of the objectivist philosophy.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Did Ayn Rand write her fiction before her non-fiction, or was it
Mostly, yes.
Okay.
Most of her fiction was written before most of her non-fiction.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice. Anything else before we wrap up today?
No, I think that's good. I think we got through some questions, and yeah, we'll do another essay soon.
Awesome.
Good.
Thank you so
Harrison.
much.